Court is in session. Please rise, plaintiff.
I, Adam Oziach YouTube, solemnly swear not to make a single unwarranted persona comparison or reference in this review, so help me doy.
Thank you, plaintiff.
You're welcome, Judge, what was your name again? Oh, gosh dang it. Looking back toward the start of 2017 during the first Nintendo Switch presentation, I remember being a naive kid with little experience regarding Japanese role-playing games. I knew titles like Final Fantasy and other Square properties, but I didn't really understand what I was looking at when I saw the name Shin Megami Tensei float onto the screen, teasing a brand new title. All of these years later, and SMT V has become one of my most anticipated games of all time. Not too long after that presentation was when I'd played my first Atlus title, and ever since I've found myself looping the first few teasers for this game like it was my friggin' birthright. But here we are, Shin Megami Tensei V is finally out, and Atlus West gave me the amazing opportunity to play it early. So with that said, it's about time I shared my thoughts on it. Just as a warning, I won't be including any specific plot spoilers and won't even cover the story until the tail end. So feel free to stick around as I cover everything else and leave when you feel most comfortable. Though in the meantime, you should make sure to like the video, subscribe, and comment your thoughts since it helps more than you can imagine. Also look at my Patreon, but okay, enough about me. Let's look at this demonic fusion of a game, shall we? But first, a quick word from the best wallet out there, Exter. For longtime viewers, you'll know that the lovely folk over at Exter were kind enough to partner with me in the past. And I'm being serious when I say that this has been my actual wallet ever since. With its slick design, that awesome clicker that shoots your cards out that I still can't get enough of, and an affordable price on top of that, I genuinely couldn't recommend a better wallet. It's even got a GPS tracker that saved my life dozens of times. Use it to keep track of your wallets, your games, runaway grills, you know the gist. And as I upload this, there's a Black Friday sale going on right now where you can get up to 40% off your purchase. Plus, if you click the link below, you can not only get a bigger discount, but it also helps support this channel. So hurry up and get yourself a wallet. Thanks again to Exter for supporting the channel. Shin Megami Tensei V, which is the 5th mainline game, which is the 7th mainline game, which is the 9th mainline game in the Shin Megami Tensei series, manages to take this classic RPG franchise and thrust it into its most modern outing in ages. This series hadn't gotten a high-budget 3D entry since Nocturne nearly 20 years ago, mainly sticking to handheld throughout the 2000s, so seeing the series return in full swing like this is heavenly. For those who have little knowledge of the series, Shin Megami Tensei games usually focus around the player character, often a normal dude who happens to be chosen as a messiah of sorts, being thrust into a world of angels and demons through a worldwide conflict of order and chaos. You're given the choice of which ideology or characters you'd like to side with, and strive to win this game of tug of war for the sake of the future you deem right. SMT V keeps up that trend with as strong of a premise as prior outings. Your character, a quiet, gender-ambiguous kid, finds himself transported into an apocalyptic version of his home of Tokyo. And before he's eviscerated by some demons that are just floating around, a strange demon comes to his rescue, fusing with the boy to become a Nahobino. What's a Nahobino? It's this thing. Any questions? Moving on! The mystery of what this world is, who your sudden savior is, what you've even become, and why your hair looks so dang smooth now is what you'll be uncovering as you move forward, with various side characters getting involved as you progress further. I'll elaborate on the story and characters more later, but first let's talk about where this game shines. And when it comes to my praises, I find myself bowing in awe at both the gameplay and presentation. In terms of combat, SMT's turn-based gameplay has never felt more refined in my eyes. Having played on normal, I'd say it's got enough challenge throughout to invest players both looking for a challenge, as well as those not as experienced with the series. Though if you're new to SMT, my personal suggestion is to start on casual and work your way up from there. Like I said, the game isn't impossibly hard, but I'd take a second to get used to the flow before you throw yourself into the deep end. The gameplay in 5 has been simplified in some aspects, yet also introduces a lot of new ideas to the series that all manage to flow together into an insanely satisfying combat flow. Press turn remains at the core of the series, a system that essentially rewards smart combat by granting both you and your opponent extra turns for exploiting weaknesses and landing criticals. You can save up your extra turns in various ways, focusing in on the exact turn order you feel is best for the most optimal combat experience. And I can't understate how satisfying this combat loop manages to be. Buffs and debuffs have been overhauled to be effective yet supplemental to battles, unlike prior games where they're often seen as a total necessity. And I may be one of the few people to argue that this change is generally for the better. Overall, each fight feels more balanced around not relying on the function, so actually using the skills feels more meaningful when you do. We also have this cool little Magatsuhi super meter up here, which is incredibly dynamic in its capabilities, but let's step back first and discuss our party of demons. A lot is done to make each demon feel incredibly distinct in terms of strategic use. Demon negotiation returns being a staple of the series, and it's about what you'd normally expect. But if the system ain't broke, don't fix it. This is how you can recruit each demon to your side, having the player appeal to their wide array of personalities in order to have them join you. Or, you can just bribe them. The dialogue for these conversations has never been more entertaining, ranging from the best of casual banter to Mothman telling me that he's my new god. It's entertaining to the nth degree, and I never tire of the dialogue's variety. Demon Fusion also returns in what I'd argue is its most optimal form yet. Fusion has never been more simple yet in-depth, with the game allowing several options to form new demons in efficient and enjoyable ways. Whether you wish to see what a single demon of yours can potentially make, or alternatively if you want to seek out a specific demon that can be made from both your party of demons as well as ones you've registered prior. While prior fusion systems have occasionally felt needlessly janky at times, or alternatively have required you to constantly swap back and forth between the same few menus just to fuse a single demon, I've never found fusion to be so easy to use and just flat out enjoyable. Seriously, if you love sitting down to fuse for extended periods of time, while not necessary for those who don't fit that camp, you'll find yourself having a blast experimenting with this system. When it comes to the demons themselves though, each demon now has an affinity chart, a feature brought over from SMT4 Apocalypse, where the various numbers listed for each element can both alter the damage your demons inflict while using their associated spells, or lowering the MP cost for them. It's a simple feature that adds way more depth to how you might structure your team, as well as how you may think to respec certain demons. That level of customization within your team is no better exhibited than with the Essence system. Every demon you encounter has their own essence, one which comes with the lineup of attacks they normally start with. With these essences, you can choose to put any of their attacks onto another party member, including yourself. And beyond that, you can even change your own weaknesses and strengths with these. I mean it when I say that team customization is an ever-present feature, remaining expansive in how you're able to alter your various allies, yet never feeling as though it removes the core uniqueness that each demon has. One constant for each demon, beyond some having demon-specific spells, are the aforementioned Magatsuhi abilities. These super moves are race-specific, don't take that out of context, so depending on which your demon is classified under, they can allow you to do anything from doubling the attack of your entire party to guaranteeing critical hits to regenerating MP or even reviving your entire stock of demons. The selection of abilities in this regard always had me reconsidering who would work together best for each fight, and is it not obvious that I adore this kind of depth? Going hand in hand with all of this comes even more control for the player in the new Glory system. Around the game you'll find these cute little Stitch sounding guys called Mimon, and they're basically like if Zelda's Koroks were actually fun to find. By collecting these guys alongside a few other methods, you'll earn currency known as Glory, which can be used for a flood of different options in the Miracles section. Want to increase your character's ice affinity? Or perhaps you want to give yourself new negotiation methods? Or maybe you just want the ability to let you or your allied demons expand their move pools. And this is just scratching the surface, as the different miracles you gradually unlock are extremely diverse and always feel useful to the handful of circumstances you'll find yourself in. You'll rarely if ever have an overabundance of glory, meaning choosing which perks to purchase is always an enjoyably strategic choice that can always pay off in one way or another. Finally, when it comes to our player character, this game actually doesn't have an equipment system of any kind, which I'm all here for. Since those basically just come out to be artificial number boosts in most RPGs, I much prefer it being left out. Instead, we have our player stats, which get boosted by 4 points every level, one of which we get to select for ourselves. I'm a bit mixed on it, but I do generally like this mix of automatic progression and selection, as it manages to keep you mostly balanced as you progress through the game, yet also gives you enough freedom to choose your main focuses and strengths. It's a simple but effective system. When it comes to my favorite aspect of gameplay though, nothing tops the exploration in this game. Like I said before, there are the countless Mimon hiding around in the overworld, but that's not even scratching the surface. The game primarily takes place in these dungeon overworld hybrids, with there being a small handful of massive locales to explore. The progression through each of these maps feels natural yet also intentionally directed, and every inch of each map has countless collectibles to find and a ton of side quests to occupy your time while giving even more rewards and fleshing out the world even further. While prior SMT games have had smaller sub-areas and dungeons that you wander for most of the game, this game instead lets you wander these sprawling landscapes that feel like sandboxes ripped out of your average action RPG. While they're not exactly open worlds, they sure as heck feel like it. Working in tandem with this is the fact that random encounters are totally gone from this game, replaced by wandering demons of various scales that chase you down with little restraint. While many RPGs have been trying to lean more into this format, this is the first time where I felt it truly clicked for me as a natural inclusion instead of simply a new innovation being thrust in. These demons are inhabitants of this world, and if you're going to be wandering it, you've got to choose to rush past them, take them on, or negotiate with them. It feels properly lived in, even if those living in it are horrific monsters for the most part. Not you though, Mothman baby, I love you, please don't hurt me. Each unique area is gorgeously decorated and structured with wholly different vibes. Despite all of them technically being variations of destroyed cities, each had a distinctive rhythm to how you traverse them, and it was a blast seeing how things got shaken up as I went through them all. And even more so when I'd uncovered the full maps and backtracked to experience even more content. I mean it when I say this game is packed. While the overworlds are fantastic in their own right, on paper it may seem odd that this game does have a shortage of dungeons. There are a few, but I'd argue that only one of them truly stood out as something great. However, the overworlds themselves basically serve as large-scale dungeons anyhow, so at that point it's just a formality. On a related note, I feel inclined to mention that movement in this game felt incredibly satisfying in my playthrough. Whether it was dashing, sliding, or hopping around the map to platform away from demons, I just adored the simple yet slick controls at my disposal. Maybe I've just got a baby brain that's wooed by jingling keys though, that may just be it. And now for a PSA. Has this ever happened to you? Help me, I've got a bunch of demons blocking my escape, and if I die right now, then I'll lose 80 hours of progress since I forgot to save. Help! Well, fear not, my young capricious fellow. Just tap the L1 button and you'll be warped back to your last checkpoint with no penalty. How's that for nifty design? Thank you, Atlus, you're a lifesaver. With the basics of gameplay covered, I finally get to start gushing about the presentation of this game, because oh my gosh, it's freaking gorgeous! Considering this is a Switch exclusive, the amount of beauty and style they crammed into that little cartridge is awe-inspiring. While Persona 5 granted Atlus universal praise for its slick UI and visual style, this game amps it up even further. Not as much in the UI per se, but the actual in-game design and cutscene direction. Geez, I find it hard to understate, but this may be my favorite Atlus title to date in terms of visuals. Every cutscene, even the ones that use mostly stock animations where everyone just stands around, has a distinct flow and style to it, and once you get to the main cutscenes, just look at this. What do you want me to say? These dynamic camera movements, the use of motion blur, the way they animate expressions and movements, it's genuinely jaw-dropping at times. Heck, the moment they gave me a dialogue option in any of these scenes, I legitimately popped off at seeing the extremely slick blurring and sound effect associated with dialogue in those scenes. These are just small touches only used for cutscenes, but they go a long way to adding a certain visual weight to every moment that many RPGs can only dream of having. If Atlus keeps up this level of directional flair going forward, my soul will remain eternally satisfied. The UI for this game also manages to be just as slick. At reveal, many people found it odd that it seemed to heavily utilize the visual stylings of Tokyo Mirage Sessions, that being their SMT and Fire Emblem crossover, and I was kind of on board with that critique at first. However, actually playing the game, it blended in naturally and felt quick and easy to use. Whether it was for the battle menus or fusion navigation, basically everything looks clean and doesn't stick out poorly. What does stick out, however, are the graphics themselves. Because they're gorgeous, I already said this. Seriously though, this game is easily a contender for the most gorgeous Switch game to date, and that's saying something considering it's only on Switch. And it's made by Atlus of all companies. Unreal Engine 4 was clearly the right move, and although there are situations where you can see the sacrifices that had to be made, such as low frame animations for distant enemies or textures taking a moment to pop in within menus sometimes, what we get in return is this vast and beautiful world with fantastic models, even more fantastic animations, and a generally stable experience throughout. In my experience, the only times I would suffer frame rate drops was the moment I would warp between the map. And even then, the load times for that aren't even 5 seconds long. And the frame rate returns after less than a second every time. My second run of the game definitely felt as though it was a bit jankier with its frame rate, but even then it was never too bad. I have no idea what magic Atlus used to make the Switch run at max capacity like this, even in handheld mode, but they deserve a medal. Look at Nahobino's hair! Look at his hair! But for real, the combined beauty thrown into the designs and models, the world of Dot, the cutscenes, and the music, oh my gosh, I almost didn't mention the music. This soundtrack is, well, it speaks for itself. You've been listening to it throughout this whole video. Simply put, SMT V has one of the best soundtracks in any Megami Tensei game, Persona included. With details such as the battle music only starting once you or the opponent attacks, or the tonal shift between exploration themes depending on the area, I just listen! There are practically a dozen different combat themes, but honestly I felt a certain draw toward a lot of the more ambient tracks we hear in the non-destroyed Tokyo, as the acoustic chill, well, gives me chills. But the entire soundtrack is pretty standout for the most part, whether it's a heavier rock or techno track, or even when it throws in some operatic choirs, it all blends together into my personal favorite soundtrack out of the mainline series. Similarly, the voice acting in this game is also pretty great. I wouldn't say that it's always a masterpiece in this regard, and I can name a few pretty cheesy moments, but for the most part I really enjoyed the cast. They leaned away from simply using A-listers for the game, and it's refreshing to hear mostly new voices throughout the experience. Some of my personal favorites have to be Damon Mills as Algami, Stuart Allen as Dazai, and Casey Mongillo as the protagonist, the latter being surprisingly expressive for being a standard silent protagonist. On a different track of quality, I feel it's important to mention the writing in this game that's not really specific to the main plot. This sort of flavor text in most Mega 10 games is often cringy at worst and just kinda forgettable at best, to be honest. But here I actually loved seeking out what each demon or side character had to say. The dialogue here is much more palatable and does a much better job at displaying the personalities and different alignments in this world. So it's nice seeing that as a small victory for this game. But now that we're talking about the writing, it's about time I gave a rundown of my thoughts on the story. And they're mixed. For everything fantastic this game does, this is where my criticisms turn a bit harsher. Unlike most SMT games, this story actually manages to be much more character-driven than a lot of its counterparts, with only Strange Journey having a cast that felt like they held similar weight to me. From the various school friends who pop in on occasion to the myriad gods and demons that try to influence your standing, this game has a sizable cast, each with a pretty interesting role to play in the overall narrative. Although this game does decide to put more of a focus on its characters than prior games, admittedly there are a few instances where characterization feels a little lacking. While certain stretches of the game feel like they're dedicated to fleshing out the cast and making their relationships either flourish or fall apart, equal stretches can feel like they want the characters to serve more so as mouthpieces for their ideologies, rather than full characters in their own right. While this normally wouldn't bug me, as most SMT games don't try to focus on characters in this way to begin with, it can sometimes feel disappointing when you see interesting depth and dynamics for a character early on, only for them to get tossed aside. I applaud the game for trying something new, but it's not always at its A game when it comes to the characters, which is a shame because at its best, this game is so dang good. Without saying too much, I felt like this game was working at its best throughout the first and second locations, balancing the more down-to-earth characters with a grandiose plot about gods and demons in a fun and compelling way. It still manages to keep that SMT feel while also standing out amidst the series, yet by the end it felt like the writers either rushed towards the finish line or didn't feel like committing, which can end up feeling abruptly dissatisfying if you were starting to get invested in any of the characters. Yet this also varies depending on the ending you actually choose, as they tend to be very lopsided in quality. While the normal Chaos Law and neutral endings are somewhat passable at best, and disappointing at worst, the unlockable fourth ending is possibly my favorite ending in any mainline SMT, though it also sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the others since it has far more to it. I feel like there could have been a lot more work put into fleshing out at least the main cast a bit more, as some certainly managed to stand out in that regard, while others, That does speak to the fact, though, that this game has a pretty sizable cast of characters, both from your ordinary world as well as those drawn from the Land of Demons. The plot has a lot of moving parts, and they simultaneously try to do a lot with those parts, but it ends up being about the same, where the heights of what they establish are unforgettable, but their payoffs can often be a bit limp in execution. Aside from the characters, though, I will give credit to this game for its world building and lore drops, as the concepts presented in this game, particularly the mystery of what a Nahobino even even is, managed to be some of my favorite concepts explored in the series. Not every idea is fleshed out as much as I'd like, which was a bit of a letdown, but the ones that are managed to keep me invested enough, even when the characters themselves had become emotionally dissonant. And this is why I feel inclined to call this game a near masterpiece, because it's so phenomenal in so many aspects, and the only thing that holds it back is, well, the story's writing and pacing. An area in which the game initially shows promise, but doesn't seem to go through with and flounders by the end. And these are things that have been done very well in other SMT games, both through similar and different methods. So when I see this much potential flowing from this game, it's hard not to be a bit disappointed when it falls short. It all feels conceptually brilliant, but narratively that execution is lacking. Is the story awful? No. But I would definitely call it anticlimactic. But with that said, I still recommend this game a ton, both to new players and those with more SMT experience. This is one of Atlus's best titles to date, and just in general one of the best JRPGs put out in recent time. It has its issues, but they're sparing, and they may even be a complete non-issue depending on what you're looking for in a game like this. If I had to rate it, it's like a 9 out of 10 or something, but number ratings are dumb, so I'll give it a Tokyo Mirage Session Sharp FE Encore out of SMTF. Have fun interpreting that one, loreheads. For real though, thanks for watching, and...
Court is still in session, mister. More Persona news next month.
No, I'm not going back to Persona! Help me! Help! By the way, I swear that P1 video is still coming, please believe me. Also, this is the end of Season 2, bye!